serve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance.
Oh, yes.
This is what Joseph revealed to his brothers. So that if it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Don't delay. Come down to me. Don't delay. When God is calling us, he doesn't want us to delay. He tells us to come. And just as when he sends us, he makes preparation for us. So when he calls us, and many times in our lives, he has already sent someone on the way, or sent something to prepare the way, so that when he calls us, we should come in a hurry. And then Joseph goes on to tell them, you shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have, I will provide for you there. Because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. Huh? And the longer you delay, the more the famine will come upon you. And the more you will become destitute. Oftentimes there's some who delay to a point where now they're on their sick beds, where destitution has come upon them. They have delayed and delayed. Sometimes they feel and they recognize, acknowledge that a famine is upon them. But yet in their mind they say, well, I will stick with the devil that I know, but what you promised me I do not know. And so I am not going to risk leaving what I am used to for what I do not understand or what I do not know. And so sometimes so we perish. But sometimes, yes, we can see for ourselves, because the Lord God has opened our eyes, because sometimes we know the way, but we are just hesitant of going on the journey. But here in 12, Joseph continued to say, you can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt, and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Then he threw his arms around his brothers, Benjamin, and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterward, his brothers talked with him. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this, load your animals
Come on now.
and return to the land of Canaan,
Come on now. Move on.
and bring your father and your families back to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you can enjoy the fat of the land. When God has favor, and when he has given favor upon those who he has appointed, when your affiliation to that person is something that can be corroborated. Sometimes your affiliation might not have been a pleasant one, but still you are of the bloodline. And simply because you're of the bloodline, God will still give you great favor. Even though you have committed the wrong. But yet, in the acceptance of what you have committed, here it says that Joseph's brothers, they were all weeping. They were all weeping in the arms of Joseph. Because they have come to the remembrance, they come to the realization, for God has opened their eyes and God has touched their hearts. Here Joseph tells them, you see, all of these things that I have been showing you, from the time I was having these dreams when I was a little boy, the things you rebuffed, and the things you disliked, and the things that you punished me for. See? They're all here for you to see. God has done them, and regardless of what you try, you could not accomplish what you had in your hearts at that time. What you desired to do, to turn back God's blessing.
Come on now.
And even in the midst of this, God is going to bless you.
Still bless you.
Just because.
Just because.
Just because. And he's not going to bless just you alone, but he's going to bless the entire clan.
Bless you, Jesus.
So go and get them and come.
Bless you just because of me, because he stayed.
Verse 19 says, you are also directed to tell them, do this. Take some carts from Egypt for your children and your wives, and get your father and come. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours. You could throw away all those half-worn stuff or the rags you got. Don't even bring those. We don't need those here. Here you've got a promise of wonderful things, all the best that God can provide for you. So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them carts as Pharaoh had commanded, and he also gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And this is what he said to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. Then he sent his brothers away. And as they were leaving, he said to them, don't quarrel on the way.
Okay, now.
In other words, don't point the finger. You don't have to point any finger about who did what or who made me do this or made me do that. Because it has all come to naught. God wiped it out.
It's done. It's over.
God knocked it down as it was coming in the atmosphere, knocked it down and destroyed it. And so it had no real ill effects on me. For God raised me up. And there's a hymn that talks about God raising you up. But the scripture says God will raise you up. Jesus said, I will raise you up on the last day. Well, this wasn't the last day, but it's a significant reminder. It's a milestone to show you where God has the authority to raise us all up, regardless of what the beginning is. Regardless of what the beginning is. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, I am convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. We know that Jacob did not die. Jacob was 130 years old at that time. And Joseph rose up along with everybody in the clan, and a total 70, and they all went down into Egypt. And Pharaoh said, I will give you the best land. And Pharaoh gave them a great portion of land. And they dwelled in that area until Jacob died at the age of 147. But before Jacob died, Jacob summoned Joseph. By that time, Joseph had 2 sons. And Joseph brought both his sons. And Jacob blessed them.
Yes.
And he blessed Joseph and asked Joseph
Thank you, God.
to promise him that he would not bury him in Egypt, but he would take his bones, his body, after he was embalmed, to take him into the land of Canaan to bury him with his forefathers. And Joseph did that. The very same thing that his father asked him. But it was the Spirit of God that touched Jacob to ask his son to pledge to him that he would do that. For, as the scripture goes, when you read, it talks about the men of God, the great men of God, who were buried, and they were brought back into Canaan. The Bible speaks about the fathers, the forefathers. And even Joseph was not to be buried in Egypt. But when God released his people out of Egypt, the great and wonderful exit from Egypt,
Exodus,
where God had given them all that they could desire or need, riches. He gave them everything that they could need or would need. They were mindful that they did not leave Joseph's body in Egypt, for they took him into the land of Canaan to be buried with the fathers.
my God.
So, I want to reassure you that God always reveals himself, regardless of whether it's in the beginning, whether it's in the mid-passage, or towards the end.
Never forget.
He says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He was there all through the ordeal of Joseph. And even when they were enslaved, after Joseph died and a new Pharaoh came and they were enslaved in Egypt, the land that Pharaoh gave the Hebrews, that land, it served as a refuge. For even when Moses was sent back into Egypt, when we think about it, when Moses was traveling down the Nile in a basket, filled and covered with tar so that he would be safe from the water, while he was drifting down the Nile and in between the bulrushes, and not knowing whether there was a crocodile underneath the surface, God knew. And God caused that basket to sail into an enclave where Pharaoh's daughter was there with her servants for her daily bath. It was just not a coincidence.
Not at all.
God sent him
Not at all.
to finish what Joseph had started.
That's it. Free my people. Come on now.
And when it was time for Moses to go back, God called him by way of the burning bush. God